So this is the most common pawn structure you'll get when playing the queen to d8 Scandinavian defense. And I did a video on a model game in which black was able to play e5 and get a good position and win the game. And I talked briefly about this pawn structure, and I won't go over it in depth, but I'll put a link to that video at the end of this video, and I'll put it up above me here. You can click on it if you're interested. But long story short, this pawn structure is fine for black if all the pieces got traded off. This is more than likely a draw, but it would be slightly more comfortable for white to play than black. And for that reason, black usually tries to change the pawn structure at some point in the middle game. And the most common, the first kind of idea of doing that would be to play either c5 or e5 and exchange off one of those pawns for white's d pawn. So you can imagine a lot of times we'll have a bishop on this a3 to f8 diagonal, and so it's easier to get the c5 break in than the e5 break. And the e5 break would be your preferred break if you could choose between the two. But like I said, it's more difficult to get that in, and usually involves some kind of imprecise play from white to get into the position where you're able to do the e5 break. One exception may be is if black castles queen side. You can imagine a scenario where white has a queen on d1 and black has a rook on d8, and that makes it easier to execute the e5 break. But we won't be getting the repertoire I play. We don't do a lot of queenside castling, so the e5 break would more than likely come about from this position, this structure, and more than likely if white played with a little bit of imprecision. So I just wanted to show a few games to show these breaks in action. We won't be spending much time on the games, but just wanted to show these breaks in actual games. So we'll first look at the c5 break because that's the most common break. So let's look at a game quick. And this is Nikola Jukic. He's a grandmaster that's kind of a champion, one of our heroes if we play the queen to d8 Scandi, because he's played it a lot of times. So you see it's kind of just setting up in the exact move order that I play the Scandinavian. That's in the Bartholomew course. And I put a link to that in the show description. But everything's kind of normal here. Black has less space, so they're welcoming a trade of pieces. This is a common thing you might see sometimes, so often you have to play g6. Lining up the rook on the same file as the queen and supporting an e5 break. That doesn't happen in this game, but it's not a bad piece alignment. And you can see black gets in the c5 break. And I won't do a ton of examples because that's, when you play this structure, it'll happen a lot where you're able to get this c5 break in, and then you've probably equalized the position, and then you just play chess. So if I turn the engine on here, yeah, 0.2 for white. So it's basically equalized. And then I think this ended up becoming a draw. But I just wanted to show it kind of when the game went along the setup straight from our repertoire. And you can see it wasn't nothing fancy was done to get to the point where we could get in the c5 break. So I wanted to show a couple with the e5 break, and you'll notice that requires more kind of like either wasting time or imprecise play by white. But it's very powerful if you get it in. So this is, the black player is Jovan Radlovaki, 2363. And once again, we see this is the move order in the Bartholomew Free Scandinavian course. Got our restraint structure set up. So now white thinks they have their ideal center here, but as we'll see, it's not quite that simple. Now everything is kind of lined up for this e5 break, and you can see white plays kind of imprecisely and wastes a move playing g4, and then white or black is able to get in this e5 break under good circumstances. And I got the engine turned on, and as soon as you played e5, it's actually 0.6 better for black. But you can see they kind of wasted a move here. I mean, we probably would have been able to play this break anyway with the alignment of the pieces, but that makes it even more favorable. And then one other common idea you'll see is this a5 move grabbing space, you know, contesting the queen side. I know I'm flipping through this fast. The whole point was just to see that break in action. But now black has a decent advantage, almost a pawn and a half according to the computer. And I guess I'll quickly go through it. So that's kind of a pretty ending. And the other one I wanted to show, because it was John Bartholomew himself, got into e5 break, albeit much later in the game. But you know, he's the author of the Chessable course that I'm using, the simple, you know, the free Scandinavian, queen to d8 Scandinavian course. And that's the same, you know, we've had that same move order in all three of these games. Once again, we see white throwing these pawns at black. And if you look at this move, this isn't what we're covering, but you know, this would be offering once again to change that pawn structure into a different pawn structure that would be more favorable, you know, if we went into an ending. So we kind of get our fair share of space in that pawn structure. So you can imagine this type of thing. And there we are with the e5 break. And I realize that it's much later, well into the middle game, but that may commonly be the case with this e5 break. It's much more difficult to get in the c5 break. So, but when you do, it's usually a good sign. And John went on to win this game as well. I'll just quickly flip through it, but I just wanted to show a few examples of those two pawn breaks in action because those are the most typical ones we would be aiming for when we play the Scandi. And white resigned there. But anyway, I do have you know, a video with that model game that'll be on the end. There'll be a link to it at the end of this video. I'd encourage you to check that out as well. But always be on the lookout for the e5 break, especially if you feel like white hasn't played optimally. You know, because if you can get that through, it's great. It's usually really good for black. And if not, the c5 break is usually a good option too. One thing to mention is you always want to flip back to that pawn structure. Just the one precaution is make sure when you play your break, whether it's e5 or c5, that they can't get any strange tactics on you by playing d5. You just want to do a quick double check. Once in a while, the way things are set up, it could have tactics erupt from a quick d5 that may not be in our favor. So anyway, thanks for listening. Hope you got something from that. Take care.